Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to completely break down the physical and spiritual journey of Hajj into a super clear step-by-step itinerary. The Hajj is one of the most profound, deeply significant pilgrimages in the entire world, and we're going to unpack exactly what happens, in what order, and most importantly, why it all happens. Whether you already know the rites inside and out, or you're just looking to better structure your understanding of the journey, this explainer is going to walk you through the exact path the pilgrims take. So let's jump right in. And honestly, the best way to start is to ground ourselves in the literal sound of the journey, the beautiful chanting voices of the pilgrims themselves. As they arrive at the starting line, a place called the Miqat, they start reciting what's known as the Talbiyah. They say, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, which beautifully translates to, Here I am, O Allah, here I am. It's this incredible, collective chant that sets such a joyful and devoted tone for the entire journey right from the get-go. Now, to keep this complex process super easy to follow, we're going to trace the exact chronological route pilgrims take across 6 key milestones. Starting with Ihram and Tawaf, then Sa'i and Zamzam, moving to Arafah and Muzdalifah, throwing pebbles in Mina, the sacrifice, and wrapping up with the farewell Tawaf. All right, let's dive into step 1, the beginning, Ihram and Tawaf.
Okay, so the pilgrims arrive at the Miqat, and before they can even approach the Kaaba, they have to enter a deeply sacred state called Ihram. Now, when you hear Ihram, you might instantly picture those specific white garments, right? But what's absolutely vital to understand here is that Ihram is actually a state of being. Yes, they wear the white clothes, but fundamentally, it's the beginning of a sacred journey with God. It actively teaches obedience, kindness, and patience. In fact, pilgrims continuously remind themselves to be kind, which goes to show that the internal mindset here is every bit as important as the external uniform.
Once they're in that sacred state of Ihram, the pilgrims travel straight toward the great mosque in Mecca, and the moment that magnificent Kaaba appears before them, wow! Their hearts are just filled with faith. This brings us right to the Tawaf. The pilgrims walk around the Kaaba exactly 7 times, but they aren't just walking. They are moving with this extreme sense of calm, reverence, and absolute devotion. Their tongues are busy remembering God, and by the time they finish those 7 rounds, they're just overwhelmed with a profound sense of comfort and peace. After the immense peace of the Tawaf, the physical journey immediately shifts to a new location. This brings us to step 2, Sa'i and the waters of Zamzam. A really great question to ask as we transition between these rituals is, where do we go now? Well, right after finishing the Tawaf around the Kaaba, the answer is heading straight over to the nearby hills of Safa and Marwa.
And that brings us to the Sa'i. This ritual is basically walking back and forth between those 2 hills, Safa and Marwa 7 times. What's brilliant about this is how it bakes a rich historical narrative right into a physical action. They do this to honor the story of Lady Hajar. She was patiently, desperately searching for water for her infant son Ismail, all while maintaining absolute trust in God's mercy. So, completing these 7 lengths physically mirrors her incredible patience, a patience that God ultimately rewarded with the blessed Zamzam water. It's literally a physical reenactment of endurance and faith.
With the Sa'i wrapped up, the pilgrims gear up for what is widely considered the absolute greatest day of the Hajj. This is step 3, the day of Arafat and Muzdalifah.
Once again, we ask, where do we go now? To partake in this monumental day, the pilgrims actually have to leave the immediate vicinity of Mecca and travel out into the vast, wide-open plains of Arafah. Let's look at this incredible 24-hour timeline. During the day at Arafah, it is intense. Muslims stand there with their hands raised, pouring their hearts out, intensely praying for God's mercy and forgiveness. But then, as the sun sets, there's this beautiful, dramatic shift. They leave Arafah feeling an immense wave of tranquility and travel over to Muzdalifah. The contrast is amazing, from the pleading prayers of the day to resting so quietly at night, sleeping directly under the starlit sky. And right before dawn breaks, they have to do one very specific task. They scour the ground to gather up small pebbles. So why do they need those pebbles? Well, that brings us to step 4, throw in the pebbles in Mina. At the crack of dawn, the pilgrims take those stones they so carefully collected in the quiet of the night and arrive in the valley of Mina. Physically, the throwing these small pebbles at pillars called the Jamarat while calling out Allahu Akbar. But the crucial thing to remember, Hajj is never just about physical movements. The spiritual meaning here is huge. This physical throw is an active manifestation of a spiritual commitment. It's a reminder to reject evil, to forcefully turn away from Satan's whispers, and to consciously choose good. Completing the step brings a massive wave of relief to everyone.
Still in Mina, the pilgrims transition right into the next sequence. Let's look at step 5, the sacrifice, or hadi, and ending Ihram.
Things move pretty fast here in Mina. It's a rapid sequence of 3 actions. First, throwing the pebbles at the Jamarat. Second, they move to the hadi, which is the sacrifice. And third is halq or taksir, which means cutting or shortening the hair. This haircut is a major milestone because it signals the completion of a huge portion of the Hajj. It triggers a transition called tahallu, meaning the pilgrims can finally, joyfully, exit that strict state of ihram they entered way back at the miqat.
But before we gloss over it, let's talk about the Haji's sacrifice for a second. It's not just checking a box on a procedural to-do list. Fundamentally, it's a deep act of thanksgiving to God for all His blessings. And beyond that, it explicitly teaches the profound meaning of giving. The good that comes from this sacrifice is actively distributed to help others and spread happiness.
Now, the final phase of our explainer brings the pilgrims full circle back to where everything started. Let's explore step 6, the conclusion, the farewell tawaf.
Notice how wrapping up the journey actually requires moving back and forth a bit. First, they leave Mina and return to the Kaaba for Tawaf al-Ifidah, circling it again with tons of faith and joy. Then, it's a brief trip back to Mina for their final days to finish throwing the last of the pebbles, completing those rites with a heart full of gratitude. Finally, they return to the Kaaba one last time for Tawaf al-Wada, the farewell Tawaf. It is an incredibly moving moment. It's their final look at the Kaaba, filled with love and longing, right before they pack up and depart from Mecca.
And that brings us to the true end of the pilgrimage, returning home. As we wrap up this explainer, we've traced an immense physical effort, from the miqat, to the Kaaba, to the hills of Safa and Marwa, out to Arafah, under the stars at Muzdalifah, and through the valley of Mina. But ultimately, all those miles walked result in a profound internal transformation. The pilgrims return to their daily lives completely changed, their hearts full of faith, happiness, and peace. And really, it leaves us to wonder, how might taking even a fraction of that dedication, that patience, and that conscious rejection of evil change the way we walk through our own daily journeys? Thanks so much for following along with this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.